Hi, it's Mark here. Monday, 9th of March, going on 8 a.m. Eastern, going on 12 noon GMT. US session about to get underway. Definitely a unique position we found ourselves in going into the new trading week. Following last week's close on Friday, we had gaps higher and lower to start the new week. And I'll go into that and we'll have a look and see where we stand right now. Gold gapped higher, strong start to the week. Oil exceptionally high after a really strong gap up to start. S&P stocks big gap down to start the week. The unusual asset for me is the US dollar index. Let's our normal starting point. Here I have the daily up, and you can see from last week's close at 98.54 on Friday, reopened this week at 99.28. So a gap higher to start, trading higher, you can see that, but you'll also notice the red candlestick because US dollar index since the open and the start of the Asian session has and is continuing to come down. So we'll see now that the US session is underway, whether buyers do step in or whether the sell-off, which we've seen since the Open, the Asian Open, does continue. I've got support at 98.93. I've got resistance at 99.44. And the sell-off that we're seeing through the Asian European session is continuing, notwithstanding the gap up we saw to start the week. Let's have a look at the S&P 500. And there you're seeing opposite direction, but a similar kind of a pattern, being that closed last week on Friday at 6,747 and a huge gap lower to open this week at 6,628, even went lower. So I've got support at 6,584, but buyers did step in during the futures market. And as you can see, certainly gapped lower, but a green candlestick so far today in the futures market with some demand for the S&P. I've got resistance at 6,703. We'll see whether now that the US session is open, Wall Street opening up in an hour and a half, we'll see whether demand continues for US equities, specifically the S&P, or whether we see sellers stepping in like we saw in the futures market where it gapped down to open and sellers do away with these gains that have been made in the futures market and look back down at the support area. Let's have a look at gold. Certainly, certainly not as drastic. We had a gap lower to open after closing at 5,171, gap lower to start the new week to 5,075, went lower to establish support, matching the support from beginning of the month at 5,015. So 5,000 is where buyers guarded this 5,000 area and stepped in, and you can see gold has strengthened since then. 5,015 my support, 5,144 the resistance, sitting it roughly where it opened. It's made up that little bit. We'll see where the buyers' demand for gold continues through the US session, where the buyers attempt the resistance level at 5,144, or if sellers resume uh, the downtrend and the 5,000 level is tested. Lower high and lower low to start the day. And notwithstanding the small green candlestick, does appear bearish at this point, but may well take its lead from the US dollar, which we've seen giving up those early gains, and that could add to the demand for gold and buyers look up at this resistance. Brent oil, certainly the big mover. We saw that all of last week, and Wow, I wrote the numbers down here. If you look at the movement, the close on Friday, $93, opened the new week at $108. That's already a $15 move to the upside. And today's high is at 119.33. That's a $26 move from the close on Friday. All fundamentals, all to do with the supply of oil. And right now, well, since the open has been sold off, you're seeing a red candlestick, clearly trading a lot higher, but sellers at this point controlling the activity today. We'll see whether this $100 level is tested, if sellers bring the price back below 100, or if buyers do step in again and look right up to this 120 level, 119 level, which we saw earlier. Very volatile, and from a trading perspective, certainly need to be cautious. Bitcoin, and like we saw last week and even this week, Bitcoin is the one that we aren't seeing drastic moves after a close yesterday around the 65,000, just over 65,000. So far today, demand for Bitcoin buyers stepped in at the 65.5, 65.8 thousand support level. I've got resistance at 68,500, almost $3,000 higher. Buyers looking up at the 68. Buyers need to get back to that 70,000 level at a minimum. Look up to 72,000 if there's any realistic bounce reversal on Bitcoin. But at this stage, sitting in that narrow range, which we've seen roughly between 65 and 68,000, that's where we're sitting again today. Sellers will look to test break below the 65,000 and look down at that 60,000. Buyers looking up at the 70,000 level for now. Good trading. Keep that discipline, and I'll see you at the end of day.